I just tell the truth. And telling the truth is crazy in a world full of lies.
All right, thank you for joining me on my fourth video. Should be my fourth, depending on how I put other videos out. I have a couple that I'm, kind of skeptical on because I don't know how YouTube is going to take them. But just to get right into it, guys, in my last video, I spoke about, some of the technology that's being used in the surveillance that has been going on with my family. And I say this, for a while, I was going through times and I was going through situations to where it just did not make sense to me. Things were happening, and I'm a thinker. I'm a huge thinker, and I cannot stand when things just don't make sense. I'm an adult, and as adult, God has given us a central nervous system to allow us to understand when the environment around us is off. And when that happens, as a father, as a man, and I'm sure there are women out there who do the same, we want to know what am I sensing? What am I discerning in this situation that's not right? And I remember one night I woke up in the middle of the night, and some things were happening, and I went to the internet, and for some reason, the very first thing I looked up, I was led down this rabbit hole, and that took me places where I then began to understand exactly what was happening. I always knew that there was some type of surveillance going on. As I said in my other video, I knew that our neighbors were spying on us, listening to us and things like that. Because again, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but there'd be times my wife and I would have personal conversations in the house, and then we'd pass people in public and they'd mention certain things that we'd already talked about. And I knew it wasn't magic. I knew it wasn't anything special. And over the years, I come to realize that that's part of the reason that they place people around your home, because the surveillance in that situation can, because we have accepted the idea of freedom so much. We actually believe that privacy exists, even though we have willingly given up our freedom. And we'll talk about that towards the end of the video. But, we believe in this idea of privacy. So when you realize that's just an illusion, and, the realization of that initially is mind blowing. It's devastating because you're realizing, okay, how is this happening? And a lot of it is happening via the same devices that we love so dearly, and the same comfort that, zones that we love so dearly, But yeah, this was happening, man. And, certain things were happening. Things were being timed. And, I remember when I'd caught an Uber one day in Arizona, and the driver, I had come to the understanding that our Uber drivers were being, manipulated as well. Like they were altering, because I know this because when I drove for DoorDash, they were just, oh my gosh. I'm not going to even get into what happened with DoorDash, but just know I had driven for DoorDash one time, and these people were just doing all kinds of weird things. I mean, just all kinds of crazy things. So I knew that they had already intercepted, a lot of the apps that we were using for ride sharing. So I would hear the people, and some of them would bring up conversations. And one guy brought up a conversation one day, and he goes, we were talking about, weapons and things like that. And he said, what's worse than weapons? It's information. And I really didn't know what he was saying. I didn't understand exactly what he was talking about. But he mentioned information, and I questioned, like, what do you mean information? He goes, oh man, if you have people's information, oh, you can do so much. And in my defense, I remember saying something back to him, like, but so what? I mean, people can come to the realization or come to the understanding of anything they want to know about you. It doesn't mean that's going to affect you. And he was kind of shaking his head like, you have no, like, I didn't understand. And at the time I didn't. I'll be honest, I didn't. There are things I wasn't privy to and things I didn't necessarily need to be privy to at the time, at least, that I became privy to later on. And what he was telling me is basically when you have someone's information and you know every detail of their life, you can do so much with that information. Just to give you an example, if I have your home wired and I am listening to everything you do, your worries, your fears, I can hear your arguments, I can hear your concerns, your plans. I then have the power to plan in advance every action and every move that you make. For example, if you're going to go to Vegas and you're booking a hotel at the MGM Grand in 2 weeks, and I'm able to hear that by intercepting your phone calls and listening into your walls, I now have advanced knowledge where you're going to be in 2 weeks. So I know now where to have people planted to follow you, where to have people planted to meet you. And if the hotel staff and the people are involved, which a lot of these businesses are, now I have them warned in advance that this is where what's gonna be happening, and this is and give him this room because we want someone to stay here next to him that's gonna be in that room, And if you think about it, imagine this kind of power to people. You question how sometimes people end up, things happen to people. I mean, I understand more than ever now how things happen to people, because if this is the type of system that's being used on more nefarious levels, and not that this isn't, because this is pretty dark itself, but I can imagine that you can literally plan a person's demise precisely down to the science with this type of information. It's really sad that human beings are partaking in this. And like I said, man, it's the communities, it's your local your EMTs, your police officers, your local mom and pop shops. Like, it's our communities that's been somehow tricked into participating in this madness. But either way, it's pretty wild. But one of the biggest things that blew my mind was the technology they have that can see through walls. That's what I came across, and that's the technology that just blew my mind. And when I say see through walls, I mean see through walls. Now, again, there's levels to it. I'm not going to say like Superman where they can see 4K images of everything you're doing in color. It doesn't work like that yet. But trust me, they're working on it. But they can see more than what people are comfortable with, and enough that they can detail every move you make down to pulling a penny out of your pocket and passing it to a friend. It's insane. I'm going to show you guys a clip. And in this clip, this is sort of the introduction of the technologies and just the capabilities of this device. And I want you guys to take a listen to what this guy is saying. And then I'll come back. And again, I'll break it up into clips, so I'm not, playing this guy's entire video. But I just want you guys to pay attention to this attorney and what he's discovered and what he has to say in this video. So check this out.
A new technology allows for the first time both law enforcement, military, and first responders to be able to detect people like you and me standing or sitting behind a wall from a distance as far as a football field.
That's disturbing, incredibly disturbing. Now, what kind of tech is this, one may ask? Check this out.
Well, the name of the instrument is known as Xaver. Xaver is an instrument that can be set up, and it looks very much like photography equipment set up on a tripod that can be put up and taken down in just a few seconds. It also comes with a handheld option as well.
Okay, so I've done quite a bit of research on a lot of these devices and their capabilities, and the capabilities far exceed anything that we could ever imagine. Now, the device we just saw is the larger version, but they also have, if you hear in the video, they have a handheld version as well. And I had to think about that. Well, what would the different versions, how could the different versions be used? Well, so imagine this. Imagine someone has a house and it's on acres of land and it's sort of surrounded by its own land, and there's space in between and no structures adjacent to it to where, you know, someone could hide and set up the device. Well, then if you add a distance and, you know, you can, you know, pull up a Sprinter van, open the door or something and set the equipment up in that van, then you can aim it at that house from afar without the homeowner knowing that you're doing it, especially if you're doing it in the dark, in the hidden night hours. You know, the dark hides a lot of things, you know. So if someone were to pull a black Sprinter van up, open the back doors, have this equipment set up and aim it at your house, whatever wall they're aiming at, again, they can penetrate that wall. Now, let's say you live in a condominium, or let's say you live in an apartment or something, or you just live in your regular neighborhood homes where you're living in a tract neighborhood where all the homes look alike. You know, imagine your neighbor having access to to technology like this. Now, imagine your neighbor just having, being some person who is, has connections, and he has access to this, and he can aim it out of his window at your bedroom or at your bathroom or at your kid's room. And I'm speaking of having the handheld version, because as he said in the video, there is a handheld version. I mean, it's devastating, that these types of devices are even in existence, to be honest with you. And I get the idea that's being sold to people where they can help us fight crime better. The crime they're manufacturing, let me add, the crime they're creating in order to give the excuse to use these devices. Because the thing I always say is, if you guys are so worried about crime, if America is so worried about crime, then why are they allowing certain things in the movie theaters? Why are they allowing things to be shown on the web when they obviously can restrict anything they want to restrict, but they allow a lot of the things that promote violence, over sexuality. They allow a lot of the things they promote with children. They allow the music that they market to children. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's like they're manufacturing the crimes and the sin, and then banking off of it by filling jails and prisons up with people who follow what they're being told to follow. It's pretty insane how this world works. But in this next video, they're going to detail exactly how the device enables police to see in your house in the distance they can see from in your house. This is pretty crazy what they can see, and exactly down to the movements they can see, like I explained earlier. So check this out.
They're able to see from over 100 yards away who is in the house, how many people are in the house, the proximity of each person to one another, and exactly the direction each person may be walking.
Now, knowing all that, the next question for me was, how precise is this device exactly?
It's so precise, this type of device can actually detect micro movements of live objects in order to determine what's actually happening in real time behind the wall. For example, let's say somebody's grabbing something in their pocket, and as they grab into their pocket, they're looking to pull it out. This device would allow police to actually be able to see this individual grabbing something in their pocket and pulling it out in order to hand it to someone.
So basically, this device can see any movement you make at any time. So imagine this. You're in the bathroom, you're taking a shower, you're on the toilet, you wipe yourself on the toilet, your children are in the bathroom, they're cleaning themselves, you are in your bedroom, you're sleeping, you're intimate with your spouse, you are exercising. Think about this, right? Think about this. Though it may not be able to capture 4K, HD, crystal clear color images, the fact that these devices can pick up real-time movement and positions should concern every single one of us. And I mean, I don't want to get into too much right now because I want to keep the video going, but this is mind-blowing, and I think there needs to be more attention brought to this than that there's actually being, and people really need to understand what's going on and how this technology is being abused. It is madness, 100% madness. Like, this isn't some futuristic dystopia. This is happening right now in America, and it's been happening since the last I checked, since around 2011, 2012. They had hid it for a couple of years, and it really didn't become exposed until about 2015. But this is happening right now, you know. So the next question is, exactly how is police utilizing this technology? Take a look at this.
So how are the cops able to control this very powerful technology? This technology comes with a tablet that is actually tied into artificial intelligence, so that as the police are watching someone behind the walls, AI is actually providing interpretive data so that the police can draw conclusions from what's going on behind that wall, and then it can actually record in real time what is taking place and take still photos so that this information could be used as evidence. You say, why was it set up this way? Because this technology in many ways was specifically designed for law enforcement.
So I don't know if you caught that. This technology was specifically designed for police, and a majority of the time they are keeping this technology completely silent and hidden from the public for their own reasons that you'll find out sooner or later. But they're keeping this stuff hidden from the public. They're not telling anybody. And, you know, again, the way I see it is, if anything is used for good, I don't know anybody who hides something that's created for the greater good. You know, nothing that is good is hidden in the dark. It just doesn't make sense, no matter how they try to spin it and tell you it's for this or that. It just, you know, people believe everything they want. You can believe that garbage if you want to, but they're hiding this for a purpose. They're definitely hiding this for a purpose. So now the next question is this legal?
Is the use of these technologies legal? Unfortunately, the United States Supreme Court has not ruled on police use of either of these technologies, but they did rule on a similar issue back in 2001 in the case known as Kylo versus the United States. In Kylo versus US, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution bars the police from being able to scan the outside of a home with a thermal imaging device unless they have a warrant. And an interesting footnote, the court actually mentioned that the use of radar technology devices, similar to range R technology, could apply to this ruling as well. Even more specifically, in 2013, the Supreme Court ruled that they further limited police officers' ability to search the immediate area outside of your home through the use of a drug dog sniff. The reasoning behind this was articulated very well by Justice Scalia when he said this: "The core of the Fourth Amendment is the right of a man to retreat into his own home and there be free from unreasonable government intrusion."
So in most cases, as you see, the police are not even telling people they're using it. And in many cases, they're not even telling the courts they're using it. And from what he's saying is, they don't even expose this information until they've been forced to do so by a court. You know, so basically when officers go rogue, or our government goes rogue like they tend to do, there is no oversight of how this technology is being used. So if they decide to target someone and they have an agenda against someone and they want to destroy someone's life, imagine how this technology and everything that I told you prior could destroy a person's life. Just think about that. Imagine how this technology could destroy someone's life. It's wild. It's wild.
This technology is often used by the police for years without any checks and balances. And the MO, the modus operandi of the police, is to continue to use this technology until the courts find out about it. This is exactly what happened with Range R technology. For years, we know at least 50 police agencies were using Range R technology to detect if someone was on the other side of a wall in a building. But no one knew that it was being used until a police officer was placed on a witness stand and vigorously cross-examined by a defense attorney during a suppression hearing in a Denver courtroom. In that case, the police officer admitted that the Range R device was, quote, a handheld Doppler device that picks up breathing and movement within a house. In that case, the police were trying to catch a man who had allegedly violated his parole.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you guys heard what he mentioned, a device called the Range R. Now that particular device was interesting to me because of the way it worked and certain things that were going on in my own home. So this is the thing. We have been experiencing things in our home that just did not make sense to me, to my family. And there were times where I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'm hearing noises in the walls. And recently I even had to file a police report. And in this police report, I had to detail exactly what's been happening in our home, the timing of things that's been happening, and, the pattern of how these things have been happening in our home. And so in the police report, I detailed that there'd be times I'd be asleep. I'm in my sleep, and then I'd wake up out of my sleep, right? And when I would wake up, I would hear noises in my walls. So I would, obviously I'm listening and I'm like, what is that? And this was almost every single night. I'm not talking about just some sporadic times this was happening. This was happening every single night. And what also was happening is to where it got to the point to where my little kids could not, my wife, my daughters, my 2-year-old and my 1-year-old at the time, 3-year-old at the time, my 1-year-old would like to lie in bed with us. But they were tossing and turning so much, they became so uncomfortable, we had to put them in a different room so they can sleep comfortably. And my wife was also having pains and things in her sleep, so it's been difficult for her as well. So that's what led me to understand that this is something that's happening in real time and something that's being emitted into our home. It wasn't my imagination. Sometimes you want to believe that because you want to think there's no way that this could possibly be real, but it wasn't my imagination. And it was severely disturbing my children's sleep, and they still do this to this day. The neighbor below us, and I believe probably the neighbors to the left of us, they still do this to this day, and they interrupt our sleep, and they really do it to me on a nightly basis. But what was really tripping me out was that there would be nights that I'd be in my bed and I would hear the noises, and then I would attempt to go back to sleep. But there became a pattern as to right when I began to get to a certain heart rate that, when you're getting ready to get into a sleep mode, when you're going to sleep and you're dozing off, I would get these jolt noises in the ceiling, like crack, like these. It sounded almost like a mechanical device, like one of those thumpers that they put. If you don't know about thumpers, I'll maybe explain that in a later video. But these are devices that they install in the ceilings and roofs of targets, so they can be annoyed and they can be set to timers to go off, or they can also be set off at any given time whenever the person who was using them liked to set them off. But I'd go to sleep, and right as I'm getting into a deep sleep, boom, I'd hear the noises in the ceiling, and it would wake me up out of my sleep. And it got to a point to where it happened, and it was timed so well, I said to myself, there is no way this can be a coincidence. It was almost as if someone was watching you sleep, and then they would jerk your bed right when they saw you going to sleep to wake you up. And then you do it again, and then they jerk your bed again. And I've heard, and this has happened on several times, to where I've went to sleep, and then if it wasn't the noise, it was the neighbor below, a thud would hit on the bed so I can feel the vibration in my body. Real talk. I'm not even making this stuff up. And this is what led me to question, how are these people able to time when I am sleeping? And then I discovered the capabilities of the Range R. Now, as you saw in the video, these devices can pick up micro movements. And for those who don't understand what micro movements is, the rising and lowering of your chest is considered a movement. Your coughing, your heartbeat, these things can hear you. These things can monitor your heartbeat. We always think that this type of technology is only used for iPhones and Apple Watches and Fitbits and things like that. But they're just giving us technology that the military had eons ago. Like we're late to the party. Anyone who knows about backwards technology knows that we're late to the party when it comes to this stuff. But these devices, they emit radio waves that bounce around a room, and when they fill the room, they can actually feed back to whatever computer is sending them out. The heart rate, the beats per minute, every single thing that your body is doing. So even when I would wake up and my heart rate would start going, they knew that they were waking me up because they could tell the difference in my heart rate. And if you got upset, if you got mad, they can read all of that. it's insane what these people are doing. It's literally insane. It is an invasion of privacy on a level that is so disgusting. Like it really blows my mind. And this is why I believe that they were forcing me to get my daughters out of the room with us, out of their crib, so there was only one person in the room. Because when you got multiple heartbeats in the room, it's difficult to tell who is who. You can't tell whose heartbeat. I'm sure they can tell the difference between, if you're privy and you're wise, you can tell the difference between a little girl or an adult. But when it's 4 different ones, you got a 1-year-old, you got a 3-year-old, you got my wife, you got me. It becomes really difficult to pinpoint whose heartbeat's doing what. You got noises all over the place. So, I mean, once I found this out, it was obvious to me that this is the technology that's being used on me. And this is how they know to wake me up. They know when I'm going to sleep. Like, I wonder if you guys can imagine how frustrating that is. How frustrating it is to have no due process and to know, this is the technology being used against you and your family. I don't think you guys can even imagine, how damaging this is to my outlook on the world and on the people around me. Like, I mean, it's just unlike anything I have ever experienced in my life. But it's one of those things to where it took me a while again to truly understand what was happening. I am one person, so obviously it's hard for me to take on a conglomerate like the United States law enforcement or the sheriff's department. I'm a black man, so they're not going to see me as anyone important. Now, that's not to say that one person can't change the world, because we already know, that has happened before, but right now, under the circumstances, all I can do is document things and, try to, expose this as best I can until things change. But yeah, this is the technology that's being used, and this is how it's working. And this is the technology that I am almost 100% sure is being used on my family right now, today, and will even be used tonight as we try to sleep in our home. I also, mentioned in my last video that I had discovered an organization that was part of the surveillance and the harassment programs around the U.S. And when I discovered these organizations were part of it, it really broke my heart. And the organizations I was speaking of are our local churches. Yeah. Me growing up in the church all my life, not that I've, been perfect all my life, but I knew God, and I've always known God, and I've always kept a relationship with God, even when I strayed away from the sidewalk. I've always kept a good relationship with God, and I knew in my heart that, when I was wrong, and I always, prayed that God would, change my heart and bring me out of a lot of things. So I've always kept a relationship with God. I grew up in the church. My mom made sure I was in the church. My grandma made sure I was in the church. And it was just a part of my existence. God, the Bible, a relationship with Jesus Christ, and understanding of who we are as beings and why we're placed here on this earth has always been something it's been dormant in the back of my mind, even when I wasn't reflecting that holiness. So to want to return to church and, say, you know what, I'm going to go around fellow believers because maybe they can offer us some protection. No, none at all. Listen, when we entered a few churches, my wife and I, to where the vibe in these churches was so evil, like I cannot even describe. We went to a church one time, and this pastor is sitting up in the church and he's talking. We had visited this church this particular Sunday, I believe. And just so happened he had a guest speaker. And that's been something that's been kind of, it's been something that's been a pattern. Well, where we visit churches and just so happened the main pastor isn't speaking, it's always a guest speaker. But this particular day there was a guest speaker, and this man is preaching about his past, and he gets on stage and preaches about how he molested a girl. And I mean, we're looking around at the congregation, my wife and I got my kids with me, and I'm looking around like, what is going on in this building? And it was, honestly, the building was mostly full of older people. I didn't see too many children. It was like older people, but it was a vibe in this church, guys, that it just seemed like something out of a Stephen King movie. It was just weird. So at one point, my wife gets up, and I see her, and then I get up and I walk out where she is, and I'm thinking to myself, hey, by this point I got the kids, and I'm like, let's just get out of here, because I'm looking at this lady, and I'm looking at, when she saw me, she stood attention, because a lot of times they know this is about the time I had become privy to this, so I was being really protective of my family, and you could see she knew, all right, he's aware that something isn't right here. I told my wife, I told my kids, I said, let's get out of here. I'm just not feeling what's going on in this church. So we get in our car, right? And we're leaving this church. The lady that was speaking to my wife walks outside. Now, she's the only one standing outside this church. Everyone else is still in church as an active sermon is going on as we're leaving. And she walks into the parking lot and stands behind the car as we exit out into the main road and stares at our car until we turned off into the main road and got out of sight. Like, look, like I can't explain it any more than like a Stephen King movie. It was the most weirdest and demonic thing that I have ever seen take place to me in a church. The way this woman stood and watched us leave was unbelievable. And it wasn't out of concern. It was just out of some weird, like, yeah, it's the craziest thing I'd ever seen in my life, right? And this ended up being a pattern in other churches, to where we would visit churches, and just so happened the sermon or what they were talking about was oddly relatable to something my wife and I had discussed in the past, or just recently discussed. And even more so recently, here in California, I went to a church, and me and my wife had been having a discussion about our neighbors, right? And about how I know our neighbors are part of this program, and they're agents, and they're all, you can just see it in their movements, their bodies. I can spot these people from a mile away. You know what I mean? And because it's been happening to us every place that we've ever lived. In the last 4 residencies, these people have been planted around us to electronically harass us with frequencies, listening devices. This has been happening in our last 3 to 4 residencies in multiple states, okay? So I know these people, and we had just so happened to have been talking about neighbors. And I was telling my wife, what these people are doing is they're using the Bible, and they're demonically perverting love. What they're doing is testing your spirit with evil, knowing that they're watching us and knowing that they're listening to us. Now, clearly, the Bible tells us not to even partake in the company of deceivers. Anyone who's partaking in this, anyone who's walking past you, knowing they're watching you and not coming to you saying, hey, man, this is what's going on. They're just, they're doing this or doing that, and not being honest with you or revealing the truth, that person is a deceiver. You won't find anything in the Bible that's going to back that, or that's going to make you, that's going to say different. These people are deceivers. And when you're doing it to this degree, we're supposed to have no parts. We can pray for them. We can pray that they get out of these things, but we're not supposed to, go parlaying and breaking bread with people like this, because if their goal is deception and to gain information, that's all they're going to do. So anyway, we're having this conversation for a few days about our neighbors and about how I just don't want to have anything to do with them. And my wife was like, well, maybe you should still be nice to them. I said, I'll say hi and bye. That's about it. What am I going to do? Shake this man's hand when I know this man is spying and listening to everything that we're saying in our home? No, I'm not going to do that. So we decide to visit a church, and we get to this church. And now my wife had already been visiting this church, right? So we get to the church, and it's in this building. It just again, you walk in the building, there's just a creep vibe everywhere. Just creep vibe. The kids, everybody, it just was creepy. So I get up there, and they have an African-American girl singing. Now, I'm looking at this girl. Now, I asked my wife, have you seen this girl before? Because she'd been there a few weeks. She said, oh, it's the first time I've ever seen her. Matter of fact, she explained a lot of the people she had never seen before. Okay, but again, we had been talking the night before that I was going to attend the church the next day. I say that again. We had been verbally speaking out loud in our home the day before that I would be attending the church the next day. So we get to the church, and this is happening. And the very first sermon that the pastor has is about loving your neighbors. The most common and the most basic instruction in the Bible, as if we're third graders, right? Once I saw that, and I was already watching people in the room and looking at, like, I was already feeling this dark vibe in the room. Of course, I had been through this so much, there was no way I'm going to sit there and let this man fill my ear full of this garbage. I got up, I walked out, and I began to talk with some of the people downstairs. I was about to leave, but I forgot my wife was with me, so I didn't leave, and my kids were downstairs as well, and they were in the with this other group of kids, in this play area. And as I'm talking with the men downstairs in the church, right, and I'm telling them, I'm at this point, I'm very open. I'm telling them something isn't right here. Well, what is it, man? Like, what can we do to make you feel comfortable? This is what can we do to make you feel comfortable? And there's no proof. And remember, plausible deniability. There's no proof that anybody's doing this, right? And as I'm talking to one of the guys, and he's in full denial about everything that I'm saying, one of the guys goes, "Oh man, I'm having this cramp right here in my stomach, Now, recently I had just been talking to my wife about aches I was having in my stomach in that same spot. And his statement was out of left field. It just didn't even make sense. Like, these are two alleged elders of this church, allegedly. I don't know who these men really were. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying these people are so demented. You could be having a friendly conversation and thinking to yourself, I actually am engaging with a genuine person. And then that person, to screw with your mind, because they don't want you to ever feel comfortable. They want you to know, even in your most genuinest moments, that we're watching you and listening. That same person will then, right before they exit the conversation, say something along the lines of something that you discussed in private at your home, just to mess with you, to let you know that they're part of the program and they've been listening. Give you an example of this. So my family and I recently went to the Santa Barbara Zoo, right? And we were getting ready to get on this trolley with, because the zoo is pretty empty. If anybody's ever been to the Santa Barbara Zoo, it's actually, I probably won't go no more. It's probably one of the lamest zoos I've ever been to. I actually feel sorry for the animals there, but kids, they got a chance to peek at a few things when the animals weren't hiding and just, doing crazy stuff, but there was this train ride that sort of takes you around the zoo, and the guy who rides the train, the conductor or whatever you want to call him, he talks about the history of the park and what we're seeing and all this other stuff. Madly boring, but kids like it. So as we're getting ready to pay our fee to get on this train, out of nowhere, we hit the corner and the entire train is just filled with people. Now, there isn't even this many people in the park, but this particular ride is just filled with people. Just the whole train was left with just seats to where there was no way we could sit together as a family. It was odd. So I told my wife, there's no way we're getting on this one. We're going to wait on the next one because the train ran every 30 minutes. So the train came back 30 minutes later. No one on the train, which made me question, like, how is it that this particular hour was so packed when we're getting on the train, but the next 30 minutes, it's no one in the park was trying to get on the train, except at the last minute, family got on the train and, whatever the case. But as we go on the ride, we get off of the ride, and my wife is now talking to the conductor of the train, and he's talking with my family and looking at the kids and doing seemingly genuine, right? And as he's telling me how much of a nice family I have, and as he's talking, I wanted to express with him, and I have a habit of doing this, just letting people know, I do have a good family, but it hasn't been easy, and I'll give people some details of what we've been going through. So I asked my wife to walk on while I had the conversation with this guy, right? So I'm telling him about everything we've been going through, and I'm making it a short conversation. I said, I appreciate when when people can see how much of a loving family we have, because this is what we've been going through and the society has been doing this to us. And he seemed to be very concerned, and he goes, yeah, did you have a court case at any point? I go, yeah. He said, was there money involved? I'm like, yeah. He go, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And as I'm exiting the conversation and I'm shaking the guy's hand, I'm saying goodbye, he looks at me and goes, stay safe out there. You're in the game now. Okay, what the heck does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, and this is the stuff I'm talking about. I'm thinking me and this dude is having a genuine conversation, but then he turns on some, crazy sleeper cell type of madness. And now he's looking at me like, oh yeah, I'm aware of what's going on. You in the game now. Like, what game are you talking about? What game are you aware of? And this is the type of madness that I've been talking about. But look, back to the churches. This is what happened in the church that day. And the guy, I'm having a conversation with a guy, then he goes into something that we have been, that my wife and I had talked about privately in our own home. So I want you guys to understand, like, this isn't something that, so look, I want you guys to understand, this isn't something that I am imagining. This isn't, paranoia. This isn't anything like that. I think I'm proving that as I go on, and I think I've proved that to my family. My kids can back this. My wife can back this. Excuse me. And consider, I have kids. I have a teenage daughter. I have a 10-year-old, and my daughters are smart. I mean, they are sharp. So they see everything. I mean, they're products of me. They see everything. They see when things don't make sense. Because a lot of times there's points where these people were following them, trying to scare them in hotels. My daughters went to get water in a hotel once, and the ladies seemed to be walking behind them. And they're nervous because she's the only lady walking behind them, following them every corner they turn. And as they're getting to the room, the lady's speeding up with her walking fast, obviously deliberately trying to scare them. And my daughters came in and they were visibly concerned, of course. And, I was, obviously I was ready to put somebody in check at that point, because one of the things that I don't like is how these people try to take advantage of what you care for the most, which is your children. They couldn't get to me any other way, right? They can't get to me any other way. So they do little things like, now this is another common tactic that these people do, where they would go and, like, we'd be in a grocery store, and they would take a cart and they move ridiculously fast in a grocery store like other human beings aren't there, to the point to where, let's say you're coming out of an aisle and someone is coming past the aisle ridiculously fast with a grocery cart, almost trying to sideswipe you as you come out of that aisle so they can make it look as if, oh, it's just an accident. But then it became so common in grocery stores that I had to protect my kids and watch where they were, because I saw people aiming for my kids. And then what they would start doing is aiming for them and almost hitting them, and then looking at you with a smile. And here is the part that's the most disgusting. The elderly. The elderly. Understand this, guys. I'm from the South. I only knew to respect your elders growing up, right? That I looked up to my grandma with the highest esteem. When I went to churches, the elders looked down on me, and I looked up at them, and I looked at them with the highest esteem. When I moved from Arkansas to California, when I was a young teenager, I had the utmost respect for adults. I had a teacher in junior high by the name of Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, out of everyone in my class, loved me. He loved me because when I addressed him as yes, sir. He said, Leonard, you can tell you've been raised well, because none of these kids address me like that. I call kids just like, yeah, what's up, but I was, yes, sir, no, sir. I was extremely respectful. I even had a guy tell me that he was jealous of me when I first came. A friend of mine told me he was jealous of me when he first met me because I was so respectful. And he said my personality was like Will Smith at the time, because I was funny, but whatever the case. But it was just, I'm giving you guys an idea of how much I respected my elders. But they have been so damaged, and they have been so conditioned in the last 50 years by the government, by the military, by our police force, by politics, that they're no longer, they're saying they are like these lab created adults who are just believing a lie. And they will look you in your face, play along to this game, knowing they almost hit your daughter with a cart, and then smile and look at your daughter and say how pretty she is. But they're doing that to get to the person who is aware of what's going on. See, they know I understand, because why? They listen to my conversations at home. They know my internet searches in most cases. They know that I brought this up in police reports. They know that I brought it up in court motions. So they are aware. He is fully aware. And that I'm the kind of person that they like to get at the most, because as long as you are aware, they know they can do things where only you know, but the people around you are oblivious to it, or at least going to pretend that they're oblivious to it. Because you can also be in a room to where 50 people are aware of this, and they know one person is doing something to you, and they will act as if they have no idea what it is. Oh man, people do that to me all day long. Or somebody else will come along. Oh, I hate when people do that. I just left the store a few minutes ago and it happened to me 5 times. To psychologically try to convince you that what you're seeing is normal, even though everything in your God-given heart, mind, and soul is telling you it's abnormal. This is what these people do. So this is what this gentleman did this is what this elder did at this church this day. I never went back in. I watched the little kids playing along to this too. There was a little kid in the church who was playing along with it too. Like it was like his father gave him the go signal to go to action and play his own little role. I got my kids out of there and I never looked back at this church. And what's odd about it is they even try to help us at times. Like the people will try to help you knowing what's happening. This has happened on several different occasions, where the same people who do this to you will then try to extend a loving hand. It's confusing, especially when you're in need, but yeah, there's certain ways to even get around that. And the Bible talks about those types of things as well. Man, guys, like it is absolutely insane. So that's what that one really hurt me, man, because like I said, it hurts to know that this has infected the church. But again, Satan's ultimate goal is to turn the saints against each other. Satan's ultimate goal before Jesus returns and takes this world back, is to turn the saints against each other, because if he can do that, then he's going to win this war. And this whole surveillance thing, what these people don't understand is that they might believe that they're doing this they want to believe that they're doing this for some reason. And a lot of people know it's nefarious. But a lot of this technology is not coming from mankind. And if anybody knows anything, those who know, a lot of this technology and the advancements of technology, mankind is not smart enough to create this stuff. Don't let people fool you. Don't let mankind fool you into thinking that they are the architects behind a lot of this technology. A lot of this technology came from demonic technology. And what they've done is they've manufactured a lot of this stuff for consumer grade, so they can use the only thing they can get from this technology and sell to consumers. There was a story I read once about, and I don't know how true this is, and I've told people this story about Steve Jobs and just Apple, and it's a pretty interesting story. I'm not going to get into what it was said, because it was something that I did read online, but it was related to that. You know what I mean? And we just have to be mindful with what we are doing, because this surveillance it's assisting the demonic kingdom. God is omnipresent. He can be anywhere. Satan and his demons, they can't be anywhere. You know what I mean? If you think about it, God can see everything. He's everywhere all the time, every place, every day. He's everywhere. Satan needs to go from person to person to person. That's why if you ever saw the movie Fallen with Denzel, demons jump. They got to jump from person to person. And there are times that they will make a person their home, in those possession cases. That's why they're far and few. But ultimately, they can't remain. What their job is to corrupt the heart of the person, get that person to a point to where this is who they are, this is how they're thinking, and they know that once they flee that person has now already been corrupted by things, and they can move on to the next person. But they cannot be everywhere every time. But because now with technology, it opens the door for Satan to be in more places because everybody has technology and everybody has phones. It is deeper than people can understand. And most mortals and most the common people are not going to understand what it is I'm trying to say right now. But the technology that we are using has been given to us for the decline of God's children. And though I believe God can interact with it, because at the same time, I still believe that nothing on this earth can exist without him. But because Satan is the God of this world, he is in control of all of this. And you got to ask yourself, why is all of our internet wires and all of our internet lines running underneath the ocean? You know what I mean? And if anybody knows what's going on under the ocean, if you know, I hate using that term, but it says a lot. If you understand what's really going on, then so we just have to be mindful, man, and understand that this technology that we have given into is going to be our destruction. It really is, but in final, there was a book, right, that was written, I think, in 1964, right? And the book talked about how it predicted that we would willingly give away our freedom for the sake of technology. And the name of the book was The Technological Society. And it was written by a guy named Jack Ellul. And the core argument of the book that he argued was that humans won't just use technology, but will become subservient to it, willingly trading our freedom and individual human experience for the convenience and order that technology provides. And a major theme of the book is that it isn't a violent takeover by robots or AI. That's not what it's going to be. But it's going to be a slow, voluntary process where humans choose the efficient path until they can no longer live without the ease and the simplicity of this authoritarian system. And now consider this is 1964 when Jack wrote this book. 1964, Obviously, he had insider knowledge. He knew where the world was headed. He knew the plan. That more than likely what I think. He knew the plan, and he spoke about it. It's pretty wild. What more can I say? Again, I do want to get to a point to where this isn't the main focus of my conversations because there's so much else going on in the world along with this. But again, I do think it's important that we do have these discussions and you guys are aware of what's going on in our life because, man, we're out here failing, guys. And like I said, I'm no longer impressed with the things that I see. I'm no longer impressed with cars, clothes, money, homes. I remember at some points when I was young, I'd ride through neighborhoods and I'd be so impressed with homes. But now when I look at these homes and even the new homes being built, my heart goes out for people because I understand what the goal really is and what's really being done. They're basically paying people to ignore the reality of this country and what they're doing. And we are willingly doing it. We're trading our walls for windows, our freedom for convenience, sitting in the glow of the very devices that map our lives while accepting the comfort of these cages because we like the view from the inside. Thank you guys for joining me in this video. As I said before, please like and subscribe. It greatly helps my family. And until next time, peace be with you all. God bless. Later.